Hi, and welcome to VIP Ask the Candidates, a set of short videos where we ask the four main party candidates up for election to be Bristol's next mayor the questions that are important to the communities we work with. In this video, we ask what they would do for people of faith in Bristol and get answers and hear their views on topics including how they plan to work with faith communities, making places of worship more inclusive and accessible, and how should the balance be struck between religious beliefs and the concept of hate speech. We worked with our partner, The Ammerdown Centre, to set the questions we ask in this video. Coming up, you will hear from the Conservative Party candidate, Alistair Watson, Green Party candidate, Sandy Horriven, Labour Party candidate, Marvin Rees, Liberal Democrat candidate, Caroline Gooch. Each candidate was interviewed separately, so their answers are a direct response to the questions, and they didn't get to hear what each other had to say in advance. We haven't edited their response, so you can hear what they had to say in full. The Voice and Influence Partnership was set up to help make sure that individuals, groups and communities whose voices aren't always heard are listened to and are part of shaping Bristol's future. The Care Forum, who I work for, lead the project and also deliver its work supporting Bristol's Black and minority ethnic communities. The partnership also includes the Ammerdown Centre, who lead our multi-faith work, Wessel, who are our lead for disability, OTR, who lead our LGBTQ+ work, and Bristol Older People's Forum, who lead our work for older people. We also have our advisory partners, Centre for Deaf and Hard of Hearing People, SARI, Stand Against Racism and Inequality, and Bosco. The Voice and Influence Partnership is funded through Bristol City Council's Bristol Impact Fund, but we are fully independent of the council. And now on to the important part, hearing from the candidates. If you're elected to be Mayor of Bristol, what will you do for people of faith in Bristol?
I always look upon faith and those who are the faith community that you know we've got to have tolerance between all types of faiths and no faith at all. And you know I'm certainly wanting to I was going to say preach that, but I'm not. I'm a person who does not have a faith. I do not believe in a God. So, you know, but I am very respectful of those who have faith because they absolutely believe it, and they may be right in the end. I don't know. You know, we'll have to see at some stage later in our journey on this world or when we leave it. So, you know, very much tolerance and respect. What can I do for the faith communities? You know, just ensure that, you know, within the city, we have that respect and tolerance. When I was Lord Mayor, I visited so many different faith settings and spoke to a lot of people, and it was just brilliant. I mean, there is so much that goes on in the faith communities, the support they're giving to their community and the whole wider Bristol City region. So, you know, I do totally respect what's going on there. You know, I'll certainly support faith communities as much as I can.
So if I can just challenge the kind of structure of the question. I don't like to use the word what will I do for people. It's got to be with people, and there are a couple of really important reasons for that. If you do it for, you're talking about a relationship of dependency potentially, and I don't think I'm about empowering communities, community development. So it has to be with you. Secondly, I'm desperate for us to move beyond this kind of transactional politics where if I do these three things for you, I'll purchase your vote. I mean, the relationship needs to really develop beyond that. It's a tired model, so it's got to be with. The other reason I would contest with that with the faith groups is because I think on the questions of faith groups is what can we do for with the city. You know, faith groups will all say they have a history, a heritage of service, of self-sacrifice. So again, my challenge to the faith groups is yes, the city should support faith groups, but what I would like to do is create space for you to live out your faith and live out that life of service that our faiths ask of us. But having said that, there are things I need to do, and that is to make sure that Bristol is a city that has a culture that lives with and values and can live with difference. We are all different, and there's that cultural piece of work. And we do have a culture board working on this now about what it means to be Bristol, making sure we can live with difference. And then we will protect anyone who comes under any form of hate crime, working with organizations like SARI, or working through our own enforcement with our housing, with our housing stock as well. We will make sure that we keep people safe, working with our police force as well. And I would say, in name of faith groups coming forward, we really took on and endorsed the Bristol Faith Manifesto, which I thought was a fantastic exercise in faith organisations coming forward to shape our city today and into the future.
I would just support people to be able to practice their religion in freedom. We have freedom of religion, and we don't want anyone to feel that they are harassed or harangued into not practicing their religion or overtly showing their religion. I think it's key for freedom of expression, and so I would support the freedom for people to worship as they choose, when they choose, where they choose, and it's a key part of people's communities and personalities often, is their religion. So I'm fully supportive of everyone's freedom to practice and worship however they want to.
People's beliefs and faiths are such a deep part of who they are, and we all have them, and we share some things, but then some things are very personal to us. And so I truly believe that everybody should be allowed to practice their faith without and any spiritual beliefs, freely, and they should be celebrated and given equal voice across the city. So I think it's important to highlight the diversity of our faiths in the city by celebrating festivals and events, including faith communities in the big decisions that we have to make that both affect them but affect our city as a whole, and to work with them as well to help communicate to their some of the big issues that we're facing to their communities too. I think it's a two-way thing. The council can support the voice of faith in the city, but also can help to their faith communities to understand the issues in the city and what the challenges are. And I think I've said this before, but I think it's also really important to bring faith groups together. I see there's a faith manifesto, and I'm meeting with different faith groups to talk about that next week. And for me, that's really important that we build those bridges between the faiths, because it can be such a powerful tool for building community and building bridges between communities, or it can be a real dividing line. And I think it's vital that certainly I, as mayor, would have those relationships with the faith communities, but then bring them together to make sure we all play our part in making the city a tolerant, kind and diverse and celebrated place that it is.
The Bristol Faith Manifesto was compiled by representatives from the following faith communities: Christians, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim and Sikhs. The faith communities commit to work with whoever is elected to mayor to build a city where everyone, regardless of background, colour or creed, can flourish. What do you see as the advantages of working with faith communities, and how will you engage with faith communities?
Well, I have actually been working with faith communities for years, as I'm of a faith community, and I'm active with many faith communities. So the advantages are that you've got a group of committed people with a heart commitment to doing good and with resources and communities. So where we're looking at feeding Bristol, again, really driven at the faith community, the Bristol Night Shelter, and when we pulled faith communities together and with non-faith providers and said, can we make a commitment to people not having to live on the street? They stepped up. Many of our food banks, the work to tackle social isolation, Muslims for Bristol going out, cleaning up the city, distributing food, in Bristol. And then a very powerful piece of work last year, actually, as we moved into the beginning of the lockdown, and we are anticipating more deaths from COVID. And we had faith leaders come together and we said, look, there's going to be more deaths. There's a number of things that we need to think about. One is, and this is going to sound harder, how do we manage that, physically manage increased deaths? How do we prepare people for the fact they will not be able to have the funerals that they would have wanted because of limited numbers attending? And how do we prepare people for the fact that they may end up mourning, but not have the wider social network around them to comfort them, someone to put an arm around them because we're in the middle of COVID? How can we work with faith communities to prepare for that and prepare people for that? So we've been very active, and I think that just shows to me that I get all of that illustrates both the physical connection, the ability to meet physical needs, but that emotional, spiritual offer that faith communities make to the city as well. I think the other thing I would draw on faith communities for is the authority when we talk about living with difference. I think there is an opportunity for faith communities to really be clear with their members about what it means to build a city where we can live with difference. And let's be frank about it. And coming from like I say, Christian myself, faith communities haven't always been good at that, and haven't always met that challenge, to put it mildly. But within Bristol, I think we have, and I think we can continue to set an example.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is exactly what we have in the preamble to the Liberal Democrat Constitution. It's almost exactly the same wording, is that everyone, regardless of background, colour or creed, can flourish. And I fully support that. That is central to our liberal values. And I think all the different religions have a lot to teach us and a lot to teach each other. I'd be quite happy to engage with any of the communities. And because obviously the faith leaders are community leaders as well. So they're central to our culture and central to how we run a city.
I think there's a huge value in engaging with faith communities because they are incredibly influential in their own communities, and there are leaders there, and they to work with those people, those leaders of faith communities, is very important within our city. I know a lot of people who do have faith, and whether any of those faiths, and perhaps many more. I mean, Jains are not listed there, but there's a number of different faith communities. So it says, what would you see the advantages? Great advantages, because I know that they do good work, charitable work with people with mental health issues, helping people with isolation and loneliness. So they're doing great work for the city and for the people of the city. So I would see a lot of benefit in being engaged with them in the future.
The faith communities are really strong communities. I've been into gurudwaras and churches where it goes far beyond the sort of the spiritual aspect of people's lives, to educating children, to feeding the hungry, to tackling climate change, to learning about each other. So they're such strong communities, and they're great networks of people who are supporting each other and holding communities together. And so that's such a powerful thing to have in our city. So I want to make sure those voices are raised up and heard, as I've said, in decision making, and are celebrated in the city. But also, I'd like to work with you on a practical basis. I'm a practical person. I want to see really proper change, whether it is making sure that everybody, young people, have the best chance in life, right the way through to our need to tackle climate change. I want to work on a very practical level with the faith communities. I know many have been giving out food and support out during the pandemic, and that's something that's really important. So in tackling all of these big issues that we have to face, I think the faith communities are really important partners in that, and would very much like to meet with you all first of all, and then look at how we can work together to keep making our city a better place.
Places of worship have increasingly become important spaces for communities during the pandemic. How will you support faith communities to make their spaces more inclusive and accessible, particularly for women and disabled people?
Yeah, I think, well, the point of inclusivity, I think we need to talk to the faith leaders about how they include different members of their congregation into their community. So that, you know, that is just something that we can do just as a, you know, just as a chat with different community leaders. I know that the faith hustings was actually cancelled, which is a shame because we didn't get to sort of talk about that kind of thing. Disabled people, again, it's finding out where people don't feel included, and seeing if there's anything that we can actually do to improve accessibility for people. So often it's just a simple ramp up the front steps. So there are sometimes quite easy solutions for people. So it's just, you know, it's just a case of those, and then, you know, supporting the faith communities to make the changes that they need to make to improve inclusivity. And we want everyone to be able to experience all the things that they want to experience without being held back. So we just need to have those conversations and put support in place as well to ensure that everyone has equal rights of access.
I don't know, actually. I think it kind of depends on each faith community. I'm more familiar with the Church of England than I am with any other. I think that's up to the communities. As Mayor of Bristol, you know, maybe if there's a need to ensure that people can get to their faith community when they want to, transport wise, those sort of, again, I think it'll come down to practical issues. You know, I'm not going to shovel a load of women into a congregation or something, you know, I can't do that. So I think that's an interesting question, but I think it's one where there needs to be dialogue, and maybe they need to come back with concrete proposals in which we can work on.
That's part of the ongoing conversation with faith communities, isn't it? And I think, you know, I've brought challenges to them. I've sometimes had people coming to me asking me for buildings and new places for the community, and it's been pointed out that we've got quite a lot of faith buildings around the city that are not always used or are used very infrequently during specific times. So there is a challenge to our faith communities in their role within the city as to how they make the best of what they've got and live out that life of service that we're all called to live. So I mean, I wouldn't want to go wading in and start directing faith leaders as to what they need to do with their buildings. I think that would be very dangerous for me as a politician to do so. But I do think that both as a mayor and as a citizen, we can facilitate a conversation with faith communities to have a look at their assets, look at their buildings, and think and come to a kind of a collective view on how they can work together to maximize the level of service they provide to the people of Bristol.
I don't think it's the job of mayor to tell people of faith how they should run their faith. You know, the physical spaces need to be accessible. We need to have you know, the multi-faith forums and groups that meet is great, because it builds that trust, it builds that understanding of different faiths. But I don't think it's the mayor's job to tell people how they should practice their faith. that doesn't mean the mayor or I couldn't be involved in that conversation. And, I believe in equality for women, equality for disabled people, equality for people of all races and ethnicities and sexualities. And for me, that's an important core value that I hold, but I understand that some people hold different core values to that. So I would want to be part of a conversation around equality, but I really don't think it's the job of the mayor to tell people of faith how their faith should be practiced. I think that's something for each faith to work out for itself.
How should the balance be struck between sincere religious beliefs and the concept of hate speech?
Obviously, this is a really tricky question. There are either end. There are religious people clearly should have the right to express what they feel, and they're at the far end. There is obvious hate speech which must be tackled legally, as we've talked about before. But I remember hearing a very good phrase that sort of sums up not an absolute line drawn in the sand, but a way of dealing with this. And that is that the weight of truth can only be borne by the bridge of love. And what is more important is that we build relationships between people, because then we can hear each other's truths for what they really are, rather than the words that are just spoken. And for me, that's the most important way that we can do that, by building an understanding of people with different views that doesn't come down to the sort of Twitter shouting at each other, which I think is a very damaging part of our society. Whether it happens on Twitter or in the real world, it doesn't really matter. But people, there is a lot of shouting and a lot of judging and not very much listening. And that bridge of love comes from listening and trying to understand what people who think very differently to you actually feel. And I think the mayor's role in this is to help that conversation to happen. It's not always easy, right? Because these are deeply held beliefs. But when you understand the humanity of somebody else, you can often see their comments in a very different light and with a deeper, more rounded understanding.
That's a huge question. Thank you for that one. But ultimately, the balance will be struck through the courts, and I think again, politicians have to take views, but it's a very dangerous place for us to go on as well. So we have to ultimately have recourse to the law and respect that. But from my view, the emphasis has to be on graciousness. What I've becoming very tired, if I think about my own faith tradition, is with the kind of the moral majority approach, where people go around moralizing at people. The emphasis is not on your moral superiority, it's on being gracious and loving to each other. And a story I shared, I spoke at a church recently, and I actually spoke about, which is a well-known story about the woman caught in adultery. And there were two approaches there. One approach, if you remember the story, a woman's caught in adultery, and the religious leaders brought her to Jesus and said, she's been caught in adultery, we should stone her. And Jesus said, let you without sin cast the first stone. And then they all walked away one by one. And then he said to her, where are the men that condemn you? She said, they've all gone. He said, well, neither do I condemn you. Go away and sin no more. And I said, there's a contrast there. There's those people who take the law, the moral standard, and use it both as a tool to trap someone, but also to accuse someone. No love in that. And there's another one where someone was very gracious and loving, non-condemning, and then said, but go and sin no more, and was gracious with that. Now, whether you believe or not, whether your view on Jesus is secondary, to me, the principle is there. I think our approach has to be one of graciousness and love, not of an effort in displaying moral superiority and condemnation. And to me, it's a betrayal of faith to take that approach, that condemnatory approach to people. So that's my personal view, but ultimately that decision will be balanced in the courts. And there are organisations, you can come to us, you can come to the police, you can come to people like Sari, where you think that people are going on the wrong side of that line of going from religious freedom to hate speech.
Okay, I think your personal freedom ends when it impacts on somebody else, and hate speech impacts on somebody else. So you can believe whatever you want to believe, practice whatever religion you want, but as soon as that starts to impact on another person, then your rights start to end, and their rights are coming in. So you have to balance individual freedoms against the individual freedoms of other people. And so, yes, everyone has a right to have an opinion, but it is just an opinion. And if you start to upset, harass, or threaten other people, then your right to that opinion ends, because you're then impacting on other people who also have a right to feel safe and secure, and heard as well. So, there's nothing wrong with lively debate, but hate speech, and when you're actually attacking someone simply for their beliefs, or where they come from, or what language they speak, or who they go to bed with, these things are not things that we will tolerate, because they impact on other people's freedoms. So I think, yes, we're all for personal freedom, and liberals get in these knots all the time, because the more you talk about freedom, the more you end up with, well, where does that freedom end? And it always has to come down to when it impacts somebody else. So I think that's the best judge of it, is to bring empathy into it. So we want to be liberal, we want people to have their freedoms, but we also want them to be empathetic. And if you're impacting somebody else, you need to check yourself.
I think this is an incredibly difficult one. I mean, we at each end of that spectrum, we know what it is, but there is a bit of a grey area in the middle. There are some faith communities who find things that for another faith community would just be brushed off, and they would find that extremely provocative. I know it is difficult. As somebody who doesn't have faith myself in that sense, I tend to be on the liberal side of things and say, right, well, you are in a society. I'm sorry, you can't get offended every time somebody does something which you find wrong, but other people find as just the way we operate. We are a liberal society, so I would tend towards that. I would certainly never ever condone any sort of violence or protest which would from a faith community, just like any other community, just because of what somebody else might have put in a newspaper article or in a school, and I find that very difficult.
Thank you to our VIP citizen members and the communities we work with for your involvement and questions, and to the candidates for taking part.